There's a great misunderstanding about you, that people think that you're obsessed with UFOs and that you believe in them. That's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, I treat this as a defence and national security issue, and that was certainly my job at the Ministry of Defence. And it's simply a question of if there's anything unidentified in our airspace, we ought to be making every effort to find out what it is. And I'm not, people say, well, could this be extraterrestrial with some of these sightings? We can't rule that out. But equally, we've heard just this week, of course, about this Chinese hypersonic weapon, this missile that went all the way around the world. One more reason why we should be paying attention and not, unfortunately, as the Ministry of Defence are currently saying, just this closed-minded attitude, it can't be so, it isn't, we're not interested if it doesn't behave like a normal aircraft.
So you would say that exploring potential UFOs, examining evidence, is money well spent?
Yes, it is. And the good news is it's not going to be that much money, because all of the things that you need for a proper UFO program, whether it's the military radar systems or the intelligence community imagery analysis, resources and capabilities, all that is already there. So it can be done within existing resources. My point is always that it's an old cliche, really, but it's true. It's better to have a plan and not need it than need it and not have one.
What do you think's more likely, an asteroid hitting Earth or an alien invasion?
Probably the asteroid, but why not have a contingency plan for all these things? I mean, look, I've done this for the government, and the Cabinet Office have all sorts of contingency plans, and very often they're for what people might call low probability, high impact scenarios. So even if you're skeptical about them, again, as I say, it's prudent to have a plan, because the consequences, if what the plan is about comes to pass, are so impactful, so huge, that it's just common sense. Why not?
Now, UFO stands for unidentified flying object. Can you give us any more detail on what a UFO might be?
Yes, interestingly, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence here in the US, where I now live, they sent a preliminary assessment of the phenomenon to the United States Congress on June 25th. And they said, look, these things, they have multiple causes. Some of them might be, as I say, Russian or Chinese drones, spy planes, missiles, that sort of thing. But there are other possibilities too, including the exotic ones. And what's really interesting about this is that the US government has just labeled this as an air safety threat and a potential national security challenge. And they're doing more work on this as we speak to try and refine that intelligence assessment. The Ministry of Defence, the Ministry of State, stood up in the House of Lords on 30th of June and basically said, we're not interested. Well, that's crazy. If the US, as really the dominant superpower, says, we've been looking at this and we think it's worth studying, and then the British government says, we haven't looked at this since 2009, nothing to see, move along. Crazy.
Yes, and if there were alien life, are we to assume that it would be the enemy, or might they come in peace?
Well, hopefully, but look, all of this is on a spectrum. At the low end of the spectrum is the discovery of microbial life in our solar system, perhaps on Mars, perhaps Europa, Enceladus, one of the other planets or satellites. If that happens, and if we ever bring it back, and there are so-called sample return missions, we'd better be pretty darn sure that we have in place protocols to, I mean, I'm joking here, but we don't want the Venus flu with what we've been through in the last year and a half. So one reason why we need a plan for this. But there are other scenarios too. What if we pick up a signal from another intelligence with a radio telescope? Do we reply? If we do, who replies? Who speaks for planet Earth? And what do we say? These are all the sorts of issues that should go into some sort of contingency plan. And yes, maybe an alien invasion war plan too. Why not?
In all of your years as a UFO investigator, at this point, are you more persuaded than ever that they may exist?
Yes, I am. And again, it's this recent report from the US military intelligence community to Congress that I think shows why this is important right now. I mean, for years, this whole subject has been debunked, downplayed, and denied. And now the US government is basically saying, look, we're not entirely sure what we're dealing with, but we're dealing with something. It is putting out, for example, with some of these sightings, radio frequency energy. So there's an energy source, a propulsion system here that we don't quite figure out yet. And of course, we know about pretty much everything in our own inventory. This is something else. Speeds, maneuvers, accelerations that we simply can't match. And signature management too, like stealth. Again, this is all in. There's a 9-page unclassified summary that's been released to the media and the public. Congress has gotten something classified and twice as long, and by all accounts, it's left them quite stunned.
How much weight do public sightings carry?
They carry some weight, and rightly so, but the center of gravity with all of this is the sightings from our own military pilots. And again, what's important there is it's not just the pilots, but simultaneously, these things are being tracked on military radar and sometimes filmed on military-grade, forward-looking infrared cameras. So again, we've got multiple sources corroborating this. So for all the skeptics who say, oh, people just occasionally misidentify things, sure they do, but not when they're simultaneously being tracked on radar and filmed from the aircraft, from the military jets themselves.
Nick, have you had pushback from any friends, family members, or indeed colleagues? Are there people out there that think you're bonkers?
Fortunately not. There are plenty of people who say, look, I don't believe in UFOs, and I'm not a great believer in extraterrestrial life, but because I've done this for the government, I think people treat my views with a degree of seriousness, thank goodness. But that's not to say there isn't a sort of skeptical group out there, and that's fair enough. Freedom of opinion on all these issues.
Let's bring my panel in if we can. Nick, Monty, John and Laura are with us. John, have you ever seen anything unusual in the dead of night?
No, I haven't, but I totally agree with Nick. This is something to take seriously. I know a former chief of staff at the White House who takes this incredibly seriously. And I think that the American concentration on releasing information, looking at the information, taking the politicians into the confidence of the government has been very serious. And I think if it may have a low likelihood of happening, but if it happens, has a high impact. Let's be prepared.
Monty, there are some unidentified flying objects in cricket, aren't there?
It's called a cricket ball, and if it comes to me, I tend to drop it. So I do believe in such cases, if you ask me from that point of view.
And what do you think about UFOs? Have you ever seen one, Monty?
I've never seen a UFO, so I think you've got to go with your own personal experience. If you've never seen it, then, you're not going to believe it. So, in my opinion, I'm not going to believe in such things because the only things I've seen is maybe possibly like a shooting star or, some, like we can see, some amazing stars in the sky. That's all I've seen. So if you ask my opinion, I would say they don't exist.
Nick, tell me about what some of these aircraft might look like. I'm imagining the thesis is that they're way superior to anything we have on Earth.
It looks that way, yes. Now, there is an outside possibility with some of these things, as I mentioned, that we're dealing with some sort of secret prototype missiles or drones. But the bottom line is that the United States, even with their full resources and capabilities, they are still refining their intelligence assessment, while the UK Ministry of Defence is saying we're not interested. And as I say, it's about time that the Ministry of Defense listened to their closest ally on this and said, if America's taking notice of this, we should be too. But they're hiding behind this sort of, oh, there's been no threat. Well, how do you know? They've not been looking for one.
If a UFO were to land on Earth, would we need to shoot it down? Would we just have to assume that they were the enemy?
No, and if any civilization possesses the technology to visit from across the void of interstellar space, their technology is orders of magnitude above and beyond ours. So please, don't shoot. Hold out the hand of friendship to these people and try and talk to them.
Yes, have a bilateral meeting. Laura, you're not much of a conspiracy theorist, are you? But what do you think about UFOs?
I think it's really important to be open-minded. Unlike Monty, I'd be more inclined to believe than not believe because, like Nick said, there's just a spectrum of life out there. Why would we not believe that there's life in the infinite vastness of the universe? I thought the news was really intriguing when it came out last summer, Nick, and I wondered if you had any thoughts on the timing. Why is the information being released in the US now?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons, but the main one is that there's been huge pressure. There have been classified briefings in Congress for a while, but particularly the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee in both the House and the Senate are really pushing this and saying, you know, we were misled for years. The line was nobody in government is interested in this. No one's investigating. Then the US Navy declassified and released these videos of jets chasing these things. And there's zero doubt about the provenance of any of this, by the way. It's on the Department of Defense website, and they've admitted they're genuine videos, and they don't know what they are. So part of it is just Congress is pushing for this. But I think the other reason is that there's simply such a momentum on this building up now. We have so many military pilots, radar operators, intelligence officers who've been involved in government research and investigation programs, all speaking out. And people are saying it's time we'd lost the pop culture baggage of this subject. It's not sci-fi, it's not conspiracy theory. Let's have a serious conversation about it.
Yes, finally, Nick, does Hollywood have a case to answer? Does Hollywood trivialize the cause of looking out for these UFOs?
Well, I think Hollywood is just fun with this. I mean, I think there are some great, thoughtful pieces of sci-fi. Movies like Contact and Arrival, I think are great. As for the rest of it, I think it's more entertainment. But Hollywood or not, there is a serious side to this UFO issue. And the United States Congress is looking at it. It's about time the UK did too, and the Ministry of Defense.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.